love across time, space, and infinity. Those who are asleep are attempting to hold on to the sparks of their childhoods, extinguished as a matter of course, but still glowing in embers. Their lives are difficult, they're living under delusion, and they are forestalling genuine change. So why won't they wake up? It had something to do with the possibility, with a synthesis of magic in the architecture of their lives, as we've been talking about. There's a soft structure that lives while we are younger. The adult world all but wipes it out. Just the memory of this structure, however, is enough to make people spend their entire lives chasing after it, consciously or not, which is, I think, a lot of what happens here. As you can see, an overhead view of all these people, all these compartments, even in modern society. So these sleep, are they a lower level of consciousness then? Is that what it all comes down to? Or is this in part a projection? Do they have maybe just different priorities? Could it really have anything to do with that? Or could they just be doing something different overall in this great series of kind of stacked or layered worlds? Consider that more is happening behind the scenes. With the membrane, the gate, the key, all these concepts we had before, the idea that information is being kept out and that this process is extremely complicated and difficult and requires lots of energy. What they see as valuable isn't what you see as valuable, and vice versa. It's almost like the asleep and the awake are playing opposite roles in a play. So do we go to the doppelganger concept maybe? The idea of a shadow side and a light side, having roots in different parts of literature, psychology, Carl Jung, all kinds of stuff. The awake then would be all about consciousness improvement as it sees itself, right? All about knowing, many layers of complexity, and I think also kind of important, first matter, then mind. Meaning first, what world are we in physically? What world are we in energetically? What's going on here? And then try to work on your mind, cultivate your mind and your spirit, and kind of regain mastery, hopefully that way, or a word I used earlier, reconnection, things like that. The asleep then would be about consciousness tunneling, about being, about simplicity of things, harmony, an attempt at that geometric harmony, and an attempt, interestingly, at mind over matter. So not actually looking at the matter of the situation, trying to go to the mind aspect first and fashion where you're going to link up to in that way. Asleep wants to create a resonant chamber, to vibrate an air column, to accept and subset and fragment, controlling its reality or allowing it to be controlled, but still relying on first principles, or trying to do so. With this nice picture of the kitty cat and all these fish in an aquarium. Awake has blown the whistle on the whole experiment. It is called foul. The collision of worlds and dimensions has overwhelmed it to the point that it has committed to dwell in this place alongside darkness if need be, no longer trusting this faulty machine. Which I think you could kind of look at this way. Alongside darkness if need be. Interesting how, I'm phrasing it in a way that's a little bit different than what you might be used to. The idea being, if you see it, you can fight it. The knowing aspect, very important. But how does this look to the ground observer? This kind of a clash, Light and dark both know. They are distant, they're aloof, to the ground observer anyway. they might seem almost like titans in the sky, right? The interesting parallel that comes across too between the light and the dark as both parties who know. But the asleep have their own set of problems, of course. Their priorities have been on yoking themselves spiritually, with the state or system serving as parents. Starting as this kind of counterpart in the child-parent relationship with a support structure. And then somehow this is meant to transform in a rather somber way, a difficult way, into the enveloping arms of the state control structure, the cultural control structure, the matrix. You know, I think it's interesting how you see the kind of curving aspect in this photograph, almost like it's trying to envelop you. You can see also Plato's Republic for ideas about the state as kind of caretaker, but that's sort of a complex can of worms too. Or suppose that people started on a ship. This is interesting too. Everyone starts on this ship. This is the embarkation point. So where we all kind of begin, the consciousness ship, the world ship. The goal is to stay on this ship, on this model of how we feel and how we think. And that's the thing that on a mass level is meant to kind of facilitate, or ends up facilitating person by person, that geometric link to a sense of the beyond. But then what happens in practice? Sleepers are still setting their sails as if nothing had gone wrong. They are still trying to get out of this through rekindling the same consciousness tinder, which is their choice. That's what the user guide or manual they're using is for. Again, with the should we tell him? Probably not, referring to this kind of imaginary body of functionaries or mechanics or business people who are carrying out your wishes of what you want to know and what you don't know. Kind of a way to personify that process in order to help you feel like your ship is still sailing along, when actually that ship, which is very much linked to the mass consciousness ship, is in a process of going down. And yet for all this, what good does it actually do to condemn people like this, what we call the asleep, or even tell them they're making a mistake? I think understanding them is much better. And if this can't be done person by person, generalizations will have to do, which is really what this kind of intuitive philosophy, or whatever you want to call it, and many other forms of that is all about. Trying to understand that process, because I think a lot of these elements have been left out. Remember, we all have paths. Even the dark ones have paths. The controllers and manipulators, or they seem like they do. You know, we suppose that they do. How do you fundamentally tell those people, the ones doing this, quote unquote, it's not their right to pursue their path, as long as they can find fellow actors or victims, whatever, to play these games? And interestingly, there are certain people calling themselves witnesses and contactees, and just people who are in communication with higher spiritual forces or higher forces in general, who believe very much that the universe does permit them to do whatever they want until we, quote unquote, rise up. So on a moral level, again, this ties all the way back in with that notion of possibility and the conflicts with morality. And of course, if it is something that's on a game level, or if you can't exactly deny that it's on the game level, you have ordinary people, humans in this world, like playing games, running around a track, while somebody watches them, watches us, manipulates the situation, and maybe the ones doing it are themselves playing their version of a game. The notion of games, of levels of consciousness, of trying things, of game versus real. Where's that frontier? How do you know it's a game versus how do you know it's real? That plays very much into all of this. Because in the dark, in a sense, the dark can't always say it is not real, and that's the nature of a game. But it makes it a lot harder, I think, if the fellow players no longer see benefit in playing along. Regular people are still looking for that source connection. They are searching for the seed. They do so in an emotional conversation with themselves in search of wholeness. So starting here as kind of a very physical model of our solar system, right? And then this radically different view of, on an individual level, almost turning that whole physical picture inside out. And I think this is a lot of the beauty and a lot of the value that's being held on to many kinds of people, and many of them are those that we call asleep. Because they're trying to keep things local, tied down within sight, home. Again, experiment with empathizing with the position that going from this is the writ large idea, the macro vision, the mega consciousness vision, the ascension vision, this huge totality of look how much possibility there really is in this solar system and beyond. This kind of a physical expansion, a spatial awareness, which is very much involved here along with the energy layers. And then down to the most local, the most small, the infinity in the seed, right? This picture too, right, of the source of things, of returning to the beginning of how we conceive of things when we view this world as a place that is harmonious, where we can admittedly experience the whole through the part, rather than trying to experience the whole through the whole, or trying to experience the part through the whole, or whatever this permutation and combination of kind of climbing up the consciousness ladder is in these awake schemes of things. The connection between the physical world and the imagination used to be intimate. This is the intimate and the precious. And here too, this incredible vision of a girl with her lovely bears, her lovely animals that she's playing with, and then real, quote-unquote, real bears right there alongside her in this kind of fantastical view. And this intimate link between imagination and possibility, right? This kind of a vision here, which is absolutely beautiful in a way. To what extent does this actually find life and expression in all these quote-unquote awake views of the future? It's hard to imagine that persists in the adult sleeping world, and yet the narrower framework of that world can seem like a cocoon. So you're starting out here in many respects from sort of the child mind, the child universe. And then you end up trying to make things work, trying to reproduce some semblance of that symmetry in the adult world. Desires even that seem manufactured or fully born out of the matrix may actually be mixed with more pure visions. For example, someone's too excited about these new technologies supposedly coming in, someone who's really excited about watching the nightly news, someone who's really excited about whatever kind of new program that we have to say is not really in their best interest. This is one major example right now, of course. But people may not need to be told they're doing something wrong. They might just need to be reminded that that world, the one in which they are genuinely excited and enthusiastic for something, is not this one. I think this is really fascinating. We want to rush and tell people, hey, you're excited about setting up your HomeLink connection and having everything plugged into the cloud and everything wireless and your car that's going to be autonomous and all that. And we want to tell them they're making a mistake, but when you think about how consciousness works, they're not really making a mistake completely, because what they're doing is they're imagining a different worlds in which those things are fine and those things are cool. And because the universe gives us possibility and God gives us possibility and choice, in a sense, they're linking up with energetically the worlds in which these things can happen and can coexist with peace and prosperity and everything being okay. And it's very confusing for them with the membrane setup they have, filtering out a lot of real world information they get from sensitivity. It's very confusing for them to then hear someone coming up to them saying, oh, you're wrong about those technologies, they're actually evil, And I think a mistake is being made here oftentimes in the approach. Because if you actually understand what a world is, it's not just about telling people that they're wrong. It's about showing them the multiplicity here, in that if they have any interest at all, in being attached to the physicality here and the energy here and how it affects people in an actual tangible way. The kind of suffering and cruelty that's within and built into this matrix. If they are interested in that at all, they might want to know about it. And that's just a different setup and a different situation, even a different simulation, if you will, than the one in which they're trying to dwell, where this stuff is all fine and hunky-dory and, no worries, it's all good. So I really think that this is right here is the heart of the elements that are not really being assimilated into the way that the awake and aware communities are trying to kind of make their pitch, if you will, to everybody else. And even in how they conceive of it in their own, personal, quiet realities. Remember, people want to feel potential. They want to feel they can dream. But maybe not something so far away. Maybe they're looking for something closer to home, this very important word. Okay, I want to thank everyone for watching and listening and considering and everything. When I was putting this together, I also wanted to just briefly mention, again, first of all, there's way more tangents, way more ways in which all these topics that I'm bringing up can go. But I wanted to also mention that the process of putting this together kind of reminded me something, which is that I think there are major issues with the way in which we view kind of communication and dissemination of information and sort of sharing your truth, especially in kind of a longer format. And just I'm reminded of the way things were done in school. And the modern approach to education is very much built around the idea of an argument and a thesis statement and things like that. If you can remember being in school, or maybe, if you are in school, writing essays and papers is so much based around the idea that you need to prove something, paragraph by paragraph. It's all about, you have to tie back and prove your point. And I felt some of that pressure actually just in writing this, when it was something that actually fundamentally I was resisting, because I don't really believe that's how we're meant to discuss things and share and collaborate, share our truth. I don't think that's really the best way to go. And even when I was in school and as students, I felt that way. I really disagreed. And it's funny because if you look at a lot of the old writers and thinkers and creative types who have produced a lot of the primary source material, the books and the poetry and, all the stuff you read in history and English class and, all kinds of thinkers and stuff, oftentimes they're not writing at all in a kind of dissertation style where they're proving something. A lot of the time they're meandering, they're rambling, they're going on tangents. They are expressing themselves in very kind of idiosyncratic ways. They're defining terms in ways that are very different from what the words normally mean. Or sometimes they use words and don't even define them really, and the readers or the students, 100 years later, are having to figure this out. What do they actually mean by it? And those become questions on your tests that you're turning in and your assignments, trying to decode all these thinkers. And yet when it comes to us, didn't you ever consider how weird it is that we're meant to basically be some kind of functionary, almost robots, writing papers as if they were law briefs, expressing ourselves like it's all about proving a point or making an argument, when these role models, hundreds of years ago even, weren't really doing that. Anyway, that itself is kind of a tangent, but there's a little bit of a tension, I think, a give and a take, because you want to get information out, you want to make a point to people, and you want to make use of time, which is what I was trying to do through this process, which is just one small little series of videos here. But it's very interesting because there's also the feeling of, no, I'd rather just kind of, go off the cuff, take tangents, and ramble, and they all have to be, all these priorities have to be balanced together. And I think a lot of people probably feel that way when they write, when they make videos, whatever. So just wanted to express that a little bit, and I think that's some food for thought. Anyway, so I was compelled at the very end of this to write just something short that's kind of one interpretation or one sort of further statement on this whole presentation, which I will put on here now. So thanks again.